2017. Happy day after Christmas, everybody. We hope you had a wonderful Christmas holiday, or if you celebrate Hanukkah, we hope you had a wonderful Hanukkah holiday. That ended a few days back. Or if you celebrate another variation, maybe you're a Kwanzaa celebrator or whatever, we hope you had a wonderful holiday too. So, Tom, how was your holiday? Did you have a good one?
Yeah, I did. I got to hang out with a really dear friend and spend some good time actually went out to eat because we didn't feel like cooking, but we had a great time.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was telling you before the show, Louise and I had an interesting experience because we went to visit her brother and sister-in-law for Christmas Eve and stayed overnight in a hotel and then drove back Christmas morning. And Christmas morning in New England had a snowstorm, not a really deep one, but we had about 2 to 5 inches depending on where you were. And we drove into that, and about 15 minutes out of town in Rhode Island, we found that we were driving with 20 feet visibility. It was like, wait a minute, what happened here? There was no snow on the ground.
Yeah, but, that's intense.
It was very intense.
I've been in that situation too many times.
But, well, I knew what the situation was in terms of the overall weather map. Plus, we put out some really strong signals about, how clear the roads were and all that. And, really emphasized the positive and tried to turn the whole thing around in our minds. And sure enough, it started to clear up within about 10, 15 minutes. It started to clear. And within about 30 minutes, it was all... It was great visibility after that, but the first half hour was really interesting. Great Christmas.
I like how you say you turned it around in your mind.
Oh, you have to, yeah, you have to, because otherwise you can kind of freak out over something like that. As the other drivers were doing. A friend who won. What was that? As the other drivers were doing, by the way, there was a lot of panicking going on out there, and I'm sitting there in the car.
Oh, is that right?
Oh yeah. Oh, people are going crazy. I mean, there were some people. Now, granted, when you have low visibility, you have to drive carefully. But there are some people doing some really strange stuff. I mean, just like you could tell they were just terrified of what was going on, and they didn't know how to handle it.
Wow.
I grew up kind of like in an area where you live. I grew up in upstate New York, which gets a lot of snow, and so I know how to handle snow. I know how to handle ice. I know how to handle all that stuff. I've done it all my life. But when you move to a place like Connecticut does get snow, but not nearly as much. And so the drivers accordingly, they just don't have as much experience dealing with it. And so, I mean, I remember the first time I moved to Connecticut, I would laugh at the drivers. I thought they were hysterical because they didn't know how to drive it. And it was even worse when we moved to Virginia. When we moved to Virginia, they had no clue how to handle it. I mean, just absolutely no clue at all. And so I'm laughing even more at them, But,
yeah.
But,
we've got a lot of that going on here because we've had so many people moving here from so many other states, because this is the marijuana is legal here, and it's just brought a huge influx of thousands and thousands of new people in this state. And the weather's been so warm because of climate change. And so we've got this, when the snow does come, you can see how many people have never driven in it before. It's the same kind of a thing.
Yeah. It's one of those things. If you're not used to it, it can be tough. It can be a real challenge if you don't know how to drive in it. And,
more than a challenge. I didn't grow up in it at all, so I grew up in Los Angeles. So when I moved to Colorado in the early '70s, I had no idea how to drive in it, and it was pretty hairy a lot of times.
Well, if you moved in the '70s, that means you had a lot of experience with it, so you know it really well by now. But I know what you mean. I can imagine how that must have been, because I remember how I learned to drive in snow. The first time that I was of age to drive and we had a big snow, my mother took me over to an unplowed parking lot. And that's how I learned to drive in snow. I just drove around the parking lot and just doing turns and stops.
Fishtailing.
And, all that kind of stuff. And, you do it for a few minutes like, oh, okay, I get this. I can do this,
Right.
In fact, I'll tell you another story. It's not really, it's sort of a law of attraction story, but not totally. I guess it probably is because I felt a very high degree of confidence. But when I was in college, I went to a small school in upstate New York called Colgate University, and there was one particular Christmas holiday season where I drove back and I had a couple of passengers with me who were also students there, and we took a back road approach to get there, which was generally okay, except I missed a turn that I should have taken. So we ended up going over this really, for the east, high mountain. Now, nothing like a mountain where you live in Colorado, but pretty steep incline and so forth. And came to the top of it, and the top had this little curl around, and then starts going straight downhill practically, and you can see at the bottom of the hill the curve goes off to the right. So it's not like you have a nice straight at the end. You have to navigate it. And it turned out that the road surface, which had at one point been plowed but hadn't been completely plowed, had iced over. So it was glare ice with water on top, which is the worst kind, as you know.
Yeah,
you definitely don't want that. And here we are going down this thing at accelerating rate, and my passengers start to scream because they know that we're on water and ice kind of thing. And I didn't panic at all. I knew, like, I can get out of this. I'm sure I can. And so I just kind of studied for a minute, and I realized there was a snowbank over on the right-hand side that was not going to be ice. It was snow. It might be kind of rough snow, but it would be snow, which means I can grab my tires in it. That's all I really wanted. I needed to get traction, right, so I can get around that curve. And so I just kind of nudged the car over, despite the glare ice. I kind of nudged the car over, and it would have just enough traction here or there that I could do that until I got my tires in that snowdrift. And it was really rough. It was rough riding it, but we rode that all the way around the curve because that would hold my tire, right? And it did.
Yeah.
We got all the way around the curve. My passengers broke into applause. They thought for sure we were flying into the trees,
You're the man.
But it goes.
Yeah, I've been in some really hairy situations like that.
The last thing you want to do in a situation like that is panic. There's always, as long as your car actually has any kind of steering at all, there's always a way out of it. You just have to calm down long enough to find it, and it's there.
Yeah, that's where practice helps.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So, anyway, didn't mean to scare everybody, but I thought that was an amusing story. I should tell that one. So anyway, this is our first Daily Dose of Happy after the Christmas holiday. And Tom, you came up with an interesting topic because it ties directly into what Christmas is for so many people. So why don't you introduce it?
Yeah, well, the topic is basically, what does it mean to listen to your heart? What does it mean to follow your heart? We have statements like that are out there, like your heart knows best, or follow your heart, listen to your heart. What's the way of the heart? And I find that in my life, it's been a fascinating subject because it seems like the people that know what they're talking about when they say follow your heart, what does your heart say? It seems like, well, they must know what their heart is. And for me, it's always been like, well, what is my heart exactly? I know there's one in my chest here, but, what am I exactly following, So I thought that would be an interesting topic just for you and I to talk about it, and if someone wants to call in, because I would love to get clearer on it, on what does this mean to follow your heart.
Okay.
It's considered to be such a noble thing to not be in your head, can you get out of your head and into your heart and just feel, and so that's what I think is fascinating about it. What does this really mean?
Okay, yeah, that's a good topic. And by the way, if there are any listeners who are listening to this live, we know most listeners listen to it after the fact, but if you happen to be listening live and you want to participate, feel free to call in. As we said earlier, it's Tuesday, December 26th, currently 8:08 a.m. Eastern Time, and you'd be more than welcome. The phone number that you can call is 860-264-5432. That's 860-264-5432, and if you decide you want to call in, we'll be glad to include your comments about what it is to feel through your heart, to live through your heart. Because you're right, Tom. It's one of those things that we don't often talk about. What does that mean? But I'll tell you, for me, it was kind of like you in the sense that for the longest time, I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what should I be feeling? If I reach into whatever my heart is, what does that feel like? And it can be a bit confusing. What I finally realized is that I shouldn't actually make any big deal out of it because I feel through my heart all the time. I just didn't realize it.
And what made you realize that you feel from your heart all the time? You just finally dawned on you one day?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how I got there because, it had been years that I've been wondering about this kind of thing. And one day, I don't know, I think it just kind of clicked in my head. Oh, I know what it was. It was one of the shows we did. I can't remember which co-host it was, but it was a show where we were talking about contrast, because contrast, especially the way Abraham Hicks teaches the law of attraction, is at the root of it. It's at the root of our living here and how we have our experiences and so on and so forth. And when I started thinking about the concept of of contrast, it occurred to me that if you don't have contrast, it's hard to notice something. We notice contrast really well, but we don't notice sameness real well. Like, for instance, the classic example would be a black cat against a black background at night. You'd never see it, right? You have to have some sort of light contrast in order to see that cat. Similarly, if you saw a white cat in a snowbank in broad daylight, you might not see the white cat either. Same difference. So how does that apply to other things in our lives? Are there other things that we experience, that we sense, that we really can't sense it because there's not enough contrast? And I realized the answer to that is yes. And when I thought about it further, I said to myself, you know what? There's always been this feeling kind of in my chest area, solar plexus area. There's always been a feeling there. It never changes. It never goes away. It's constant. And I think for the longest time in my life, I just kind of dismissed it because I didn't know what it was. It never changed, so I figured, well, maybe it's my imagination. I wasn't really sure there was actually anything there. And as I thought about it, I realized that's my connection to the other side. The fact that it doesn't change shows that it's the connection to the other side. The fact that it doesn't change also shows why I didn't figure out what it was. It would be too easy to miss it because there's no contrast there. So that's how I figured it out.
And if someone says to you, well, what does your heart say about this? What do you feel in your heart? So what's your answer? I mean, is it, do you then feel something, or do you search for that? Or I
can't say I feel anything different. What I do is realize, the one thing I have figured out so far, there are other people who know how to get messages and so forth, and I haven't really gotten good at that. Maybe like once in a millennial I can get one, but for the most part, I'm not good at that yet. I will be. I think I eventually will be, but not yet. But what I am able to do is recognize that when I am in a place where I'm trying to attract something and it's not coming through the way I want it to, then I can just check, okay, well, how does it feel there in my solar plexus? And I realize if it's not, especially if it's not happening, I realize that whatever it is that I have chosen to focus on or feel about it or whatever does not resonate with that spot in the middle of my chest. So I can sense that much contrast. So the rule of thumb is, if whatever it is I'm thinking about matches the good feeling that's in my chest like that, then I know I'm onto the right track. If it doesn't match that kind of good feeling, then I know I'm on the wrong track. That's the extent of my control over it, which is what Abraham Hicks teaches us, right?
But you go there quite a bit then, to that feeling.
No, I can't say I go there quite a bit. I go there occasionally. Most often when I'm trying to figure something out.
Yeah.
I mean, how about you?
So would you say you're a person who lives more in your head or more in your heart? Or does it? Or do you even want to make that evaluation?
I normally don't even think about it that way, but if I had to pick, I'd say I probably live in my head more than my heart, but I've learned to live more in my heart than I did in the past, by a lot. I used to live almost exclusively in my head. Now, not so much.
In 2011, I had gotten divorced in January of 2011, and I had realized that my divorce was pretty impactful on my psyche, on my whole consciousness, and it really was a wake-up call.
Sure.
And I remember during 2011, I started doing a lot of soul searching after the divorce, and at one point, I don't know because it was what I was reading or just the realizations of who I am as a person. And a lot of people had said to me over the years, wow, you're so in your head. You spend so much time thinking. And I was, I've even had people really close to me say, you spend more time thinking than any person I've ever met. This was in the past, not so much now. But I thought to myself, really? Like, I've seen because I've also had people tell me you so are in your heart. You so heartfelt. I really feel your heart, Tom. And so I thought, okay, but I was always sort of confused about the two. And so in doing this show, I started looking into how would I think about this in terms of law of attraction? And I realized I came up with some questions right away and says, well, is aligning with source the same as being in my heart? Or if I'm opening to listening to my soul, is my soul the same as my heart? And if I'm aligning with joy and freedom, is that the same as being in my heart? So, you know how Abraham talks so much about the whole name of the game in this life is to enjoy the journey. And if we learn to enjoy the journey moment by moment, then it'll naturally lead us to the destinations that we want to manifest in our lives. Those things will unfold naturally because they're already in our vortex. So then I started to think, well, is my vortex my heart? And so it all started to dawn on me that in the way I look at life, those things are all synonymous.
Sure.
I do this thing called automatic writing in order to get insight into my life, and I learned it through this class I took about what kind of divine guidance do you turn to? What kind of a higher power, higher guidance do you turn to in your life? And in doing that class, they helped us say, you've got to get really clear on who you're asking for the guidance. Because if you're not clear about it, you might not really be trusting what you receive. And if you don't trust that something's going to come through, it's not going to come through. You're not, because in automatic writing, you ask a question to your higher self or to whatever you believe. If you believe in Jesus, you believe in Buddha, you believe in God, whatever you believe in, you ask a question at the top of the page to those higher powers, and then you just let your pen start writing. And as you don't think about what you're writing, you just keep writing. So whatever words come up, you just don't stop. You don't have to write super fast, but you don't take your pen off the page in a sense. You just keep writing. You just keep writing, until you feel like it's done. The transmission, you've received it. And when I did the work of saying, well, who am I asking for this guidance? My answer came, I'm asking my heart. I'm asking my heart, my soul, my inner being, my source self, the great mystery, what names like that, or at first it was I'm asking the creator, but then it was like, well, what's the creator? The creator is my higher self, the inner being. And it started to all become one thing, but the heart was synonymous with all that. So I started realizing that everything that is taught about law of attraction is about aligning with source. And that's what you do first. And then like the Heart Math Institute has studied the heart in great depth, and there's some great books out from the Heart Math Institute about what your heart really is. And they said that feelings are where everything starts. It all starts in your solar plexus. Then the solar plexus, the heart, our literal heart, has nerve impulses it sends to the brain. Messages are sent to the brain, and then that's where thoughts come from based on the feeling that we get first. And then the thoughts tell our body what to do. And they've sort of figured it out. That's how it works. And so when it all comes down to it, it's like exactly what Abraham, for example, says is you've got to first get in touch with the feeling. Once you're feeling something, then it'll lead to the thoughts. The impulses will come about what to do next in your life. So it's kind of like I'm starting to see there's this incredible system. The way it's set up is first we feel with our hearts, then we think, then we act. So that's kind of what I'm noticing. It's
when you're describing.
What do you think of that?
When you're describing your automatic writing practice, and you're talking about how you're just letting it come, which I presume meant that it's coming from your heart. What's going on in your head?
Well, in my head, I'm trying to not censure anything that's coming. So if the word, the word interesting comes as, say the word, I start my sentence with interestingly, and that's just the word that shows up. I don't censor it. I just say, okay, I don't know why I'm saying that word. So then I just write interestingly. I don't remember the last time this happened in my life. Now, I see that sentence right there. That just sort of came to me. I don't know why that sentence came to me, but it just did. And so I'll start writing like that. And so each sentence comes out like that. I don't know why I'm saying what I'm saying, and I just let I try to relax my mind, so I'm not censoring anything that ideally my heart, my soul, my higher self wants to say to me. So I'll ask a question, like, what do I do about this relationship? And then I'll ask it of my heart, my soul, my inner being, then I'll just start writing. And I find that when I read those, compared to when I'm writing from my analytical mind, where I ask the same question, but then I ask I just try to use my reason to answer the question, it's a completely different read. It's like the difference between writing with your right hand and writing with your left hand. If you're right hand dominant and you try writing with your left hand, to answer the same question, you'll often get a completely different answer. It'll be like mind-blowing that what your left hand will put on the paper compared to what your right hand will put on the paper. See, it's the difference between the analytical mind and the heart.
See, I wouldn't know about that because it doesn't matter whether I write with my right hand or my left hand. It's still illegible in both cases. But I understand what you mean.
Yeah, right. Well, so for you'd have to, I don't know how you could do this on the computer. You can't
type with the right hand, type with the left hand.
You could speak, into a voice recognition program. That's how I do most of my typing. I speak into voice recognition. And if I'm speaking and I'm disconnecting from my analytical mind and just letting the words flow out, it's definitely a different, like I would do that for writing speeches. I'd go sit on a creek up in the mountains here, and I would take a digital recorder with me. And when I felt, I'd sit in meditation for half an hour and get really tuned into the forest, and then I would turn on my recorder and just start speaking and see whatever came out. I would record it, and then I would go back home and transcribe it and use that as the basis of developing a speech, because I would want to see what my soul, what my heart wanted to say. And I find that they are different worlds than the world of logic and reason.
Now, when you do that kind of practice, do you I want to say this in a gentle way, but I'm not sure there's a way to do it. So do you ever just speak some stuff like that and play it back and say to yourself, well, that's just nonsense?
Well, I definitely have. That's the biggest thing that it's kept me from being a robust public speaker in the last, because I'm developing myself to be a robust public speaker, but I want it to come from my heart. I want my speaking and my writing to come from my heart. Same as the blogs on my website. I don't want them just to be a bunch of logic and reason. I want them to be a heartfelt expression of my soul, of my higher self, because I feel like my real contribution in the world has got to come. I want it to come from my higher self, from my inner being. And yes, the thing that stops me is sometimes I'll dictate something or I'll write something in handwriting, and I'll look at it and I'll read it and I go, well, that's not all that significant. It's like I'm not sure how I can turn this into something that's a valuable blog or it's a valuable speech. But by and large, that's not true. By and large, what I do write, if I really look at it, I think this is actually really heartfelt, good stuff that's written here.
Okay.
And then my question becomes, how do I turn this into something to tell to the public, to tell to everybody?
Right. Yeah, because that's also the other part I would think. I would imagine that when you're speaking from your heart, you're probably not always using the best grammar and the best diction and the best use of the English language. You probably have to do a little editing, I would think, to make it work.
The funniest thing about it is that it's so simple. So much of it is really simple, and I've noticed that from some channeled entities that I listen to, or this teacher I had from India for years, and he's considered a guru of the heart. He's like, his name even means the savior of the heart, and or the savior of love, and I'm thinking, what's that about? But his words are always really simple. He's got really simple things to say, but when you listen to it, you go, well, yeah, but it's simple, but that's kind of the main message I need to know in my life, that life is about love, life is about joy, life is about inner peace, and those kind of messages,
Interesting. So you're finding then you really don't have to edit it, then it just comes out usable form.
I never edit it.
No. That's interesting.
Yeah. And it's just getting to the point that I'm going to feel I'm actually going to take another course, and it's starting in about a week, which is about how to channel these higher well, this higher wisdom, how to channel this heart wisdom through myself even more, because I feel like it's the only thing I want to do in my life now is channel my wisdom from my higher self, because I no longer want to just be a person who lives just by reason alone, just by my analytic mind. I made a decision in 2011 after my divorce to move from my head to my heart, to literally made a conscious decision that I wanted to come from my heart more. And I feel like I've been working on that for the last 7 years, because it hasn't been just a slam dunk easy thing for me to be in my heart more. Mm-hmm. But I feel like it's a great thing to cultivate for me. It's like, you think about Jesus, right, and all the stories about Jesus and the Bible and all that. It's like that seems to be his whole thing, was to be heart-centered. And, you think of Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela or, these people we admire a lot, Mother Teresa, and in a way, I look at each of them and I go, well, they were heart-centered people. That's what they were mainly looking at, what is the good of all. And when you listen to Abraham talk about Source, they always say Source doesn't see anything in a critical way or in a judgmental way. Source sees everyone as equally beautiful. So, it doesn't matter who that person is nor what they've done. Source sees them through the eyes of love. Source sees them completely as a beautiful being, right? Mm-hmm. So when you think about it, when we're trying to align with Source, we're aligning with that part of us that's coming from love. So in a sense, we're aligning with our hearts. I don't see the difference. Do you?
I'm not sure what we're differentiating here, but I would say
the difference between are you in your heart or are you aligning with Source? Is there a difference?
Yeah, I know that's partly why this is an interesting topic from my perspective, because for significant portions of my pre-LOA life, by which I mean life before I became aware of the law of attraction, I bought into the differentiation between head and heart, and I understood. My sister has always been very, we'll say, mystically oriented, and she would share her stuff, and then I was brought up in a Christian church, so that there was their side of it, and I was also an admirer of Thomas Jefferson. He wrote a very famous piece about the head and the heart. I mean, so I've experienced it from a number of different perspectives. Oh yeah, it was about his alleged love affair with, I can't remember what her name was. When he was over in France, he met a woman, and there is a lot of debate as to whether or not they actually had an affair, but he wrote this letter to her, and it became a rather famous letter called My Head and My Heart. So I've had a lot of exposure to it. After I became interested in the law of attraction and studied it for a little bit and got to the point where I was doing the podcast, I actually reached a point where I don't really see much of a distinction between the two. And part of the reason I feel that way is due to conversations. Now, I'm not saying this is her fault. This is me drawing my own conclusions. But she was just sharing information. But she is my sister-in-law, Ioana, who is a research scientist. She's currently pursuing her PhD in biostatistics, and she has shared. For a while, she was actually the co-host on the show, and she shared a lot of her research findings, which were really fascinating. That tied into not only the law of attraction, but a lot of the things that we like to talk about here. But anyway, she would explain to me how science has found, for instance, that a great deal of what we associate as being brain power actually happens in the heart. That actually the heart is more brain-like than the brain.
Right,
and,
I've heard that too.
So when you look at it that way, you begin to realize, well, are they really separate? I mean, they're two different organs separated by a physical distance, but that seems to be about it. I mean, your nervous system isn't in one place either. It's throughout your body, but it's still the nervous system. So yeah. Are they separate pieces of the nervous system? No, not really. They're all part of the same thing. Well, that's the way I look at it with the heart, the head and the heart. I don't really see them as being separate anymore. I think what actually happens when we talk about somebody who lives in their head, I think what we're really saying is it's a person who is cut off from the other part of the brain, the heart part. They are not paying attention to that part, and that's the part we associate with emotions, with love, with happiness, with joy, with enthusiasm, with gratitude, and all that kind of thing, and with the negative emotions too. We associate fear and doubt and depression and all that stuff as well. We don't tend to put that in the head. We tend to put it in the heart. And yet, how often do we say, "Well, it's all in your head"? Well,
right.
Once again, we're really talking about an extended organ system between the head and the heart. So for me, it's an arbitrary distinction. For me, it is not as meaningful as it was before I became interested in the law of attraction, ironically enough.
Yeah. Well, the exact same thing happened for me. And interestingly, there was a piece, I listened to another channel transmission that comes from the Council of Radiant Light. And these beings, put out this one transmission about a year ago or so, 6 months ago, and the title of it was like your mind is a beautiful thing or something like that. It was the whole piece. These 3 pages were about how your mind is such a beneficial thing to you that instead of having that being maligned so much the way psychology and different traditions that I've been noticing over the years make the mind almost like a villain. They call it, what do they call it? Your monkey mind, right? Monkey mind, and it's got all these different names. All the gremlins that live in your mind, and they sabotage you, and they set you up for failure, and they do all these things, because it's almost like you have this part of you that's so friggin' confused that it's just going to drive you off a cliff. Whereas your heart will always steer you right and will never drive you off a cliff. It'll always take you to the right relationships and the right careers and the right health and everything, whereas your mind can send you on these crazy wild goose chases, and it's like this monkey that's out of control. So you've always got to control that mind. And this whole piece was saying, no, you don't have to think of it that way. Think of it as this incredibly beautiful, like you just described it. It's part of your heart. It's part of one functioning thing, and it's called a human being. It's called a human being that really knows how to be functioning in a really integral, beautiful way when we quit maligning our mind so much, right?
Yeah.
So I agree with you in that sense of what you're saying about that. And that could be a whole nother show, like a whole nother podcast about, what is it to use your mind in a incredibly healthy way.
It's funny too, because when Ioana was explaining the whole thing to me, she was describing how there are studies that have been done on people who have had severe brain traumas and so forth, to the extent that there were certain areas of the brain that are associated with certain functions that we do, either bodily or mentally, and the damage was so extensive that those functions should have stopped. They should not have. It should not have been possible for them to continue, and yet the human body found a way to continue them. And when they trace them, they find that areas of the heart took over. So the heart was doing brain functions. This isn't like theoretical anymore. This is science, And when science is saying that, you have to say, well, shoot, I got to pay attention to that. What's going on here? This is interesting.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I really like it. But all that being said, I got to say that I've had a battle with my thinking versus my feeling, in a sense that I learned so much to rely on my intellectual strength, because I can be very intellectual, that I notice even with law of attraction that sometimes I want to think my way into a manifestation, like instead of feel my way into a manifestation. So, for example, I could write down, things I appreciate in an appreciation journal, which is all about feeling appreciation, right? But instead of feeling appreciation, I feel like it seems like sometimes what I'm doing is I'm writing the thing, but I'm not feeling the feeling. And it's the same as, let's say that I want to, have a certain amount of money and I want to have it by a certain date. And so I write all the time, or I lay on the couch and I visualize having the money. But getting in touch with the feeling is where it all comes from. You know, Abraham says you won't get any of the things you want in your life without getting into the feeling. You know, you got to feel it first. And so I find that that's where the whole thing of not being in my head and being in my heart becomes so important. Like, what is it to feel it? And here's the interesting thing. To feel it, for me, means aligning with Source, and often it means going general. It means getting into a place where I feel joy. You know, they say if you can just be happy, get into a place where you feel joy, a lot of the things you want that are in your vortex will just flow into your life. These things that you want will start showing up more and more in your life the more you get into a true place of feeling joy. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, what it means to me is I've got to get into my heart. I've got to relax. I've got to chill out. I want to just feel good. And then, you know, basically it means going from my head to my heart. You know, it really is the same exact thing. Not being so much into the thinking about it, which often turns into worry and fear and doubt and trying too hard, a lot of trying too hard. So all those things are like what sabotages having the lives we want. We just trying too hard. We're thinking too much. We're worrying about it. We're obsessing about it, you know, instead of just relaxing and trusting. I'm just going to relax and enjoy my life, and these things will begin to show up.
I think you're touching on the part that is the most useful information, which is the idea that when we are more in our head and not in our heart, so to speak, what we're really doing is we are coming from a place of fear and doubt. And the way I would illustrate that in my own experience is when I find myself very cerebrally involved, it's almost always because I'm trying to make sense out of something. You gave the example of something you're trying to attract, okay? So if I'm trying to attract something and I feel like I'm stumbling because I can't quite get my head around it, there's the phrase, right, to get your head around it, that's where I'm feeling the most negative emotion. I'm feeling the most fear and the most doubt when I'm in that space. So it's almost like the two, what one leads to the other and the other leads to the one in both directions. You know, on the one hand, it's the fear and the doubt that leads to me being cerebral. On the other hand, it's the cerebral that leads me to feeling the fear and the doubt. And it's all just kind of a great big way of saying, I don't know how to express this. I don't know how to think about this. I can't think of a way. I can't find a way to put this in an abstract framework that makes sense to myself. And that's when I get stuck. So the trick at that point becomes to realize, okay, well, if I'm not finding a way to put an abstract framework around it, it probably means I don't know it well enough yet. So if I don't know it well enough yet, that's where I have to start feeling it first. Because feeling will lead me there. Feeling will lead me to the thoughts. And once I have just kind of gone inside and said, okay, so not only what am I feeling, but where do I feel good? Because you were emphasizing the positive emotions, and I think you're right about that. When I start looking at where are the positive emotions, what parts of my life are feeling good, and when I look at what's going on that's good in my life and so forth, all of a sudden, all of the abstract concepts I was looking for start to fill themselves in. So that's the pattern you're describing there. You're describing that pattern of how when you get out of your own way, and you just go to where your heart is, and you start feeling the joy and feeling the compassion and feeling the gratitude and so on and so forth, that it all just comes to you. That's the way it seems to me too, and that's what I was trying to describe there. So for me, getting out of my own way, getting out of my head really means don't worry so much about what the abstract form is yet. You're putting the cart before the horse. Find out what it's about first, and feel it first, and then it'll all make sense.
Feel it first. Yeah, when I was checking on my language, when I was really getting heavily into learning the law of attraction, I realized that a lot of the languaging I was using was reflecting why I had problems. Why I wasn't as happy as I wanted to be, or manifesting what I wanted to manifest, of the degree of abundance and inner peace and good relationships and health. All these things were because I was, and one of the main phrases I was always using was, I need to figure out how.
Right.
So I'd be saying, I need to figure out how to get over this condition in my sinuses, or I need to figure out how I'm going to really make more money, and I need to figure out how am I going to get to the point that I can attract the right people into my life, the kind of friends I really want.
And we've all done that.
And I got to figure out where I really want to live.
Right.
And all of it was like intellectual. Like I have a journey here. I have a project, and I've got to work on this project. And in order to get what I want, it's going to take a bunch of hard work and a bunch of effort.
Yep.
And that's completely antithetical now. That's the opposite way to approach it. Instead, like you said, what's the good feelings I want to have when I finally have that amount of money, when I finally feel that health, when I finally have those friendships or that relationship with that one person? What's the feelings I'm trying to get to? So it's like, and Abraham just talks about this endlessly, like, can you feel this stuff now instead of waiting to feel it when it finally manifests, And so in a way, it says to me, can I just get in my heart, get in that place in me where I can relax, trust, and allow myself to feel these good feelings now. And then these things will just show up.
And the best clue that you need to get to that space is where you can't figure it out. Because that's the nature of it. If you could figure it out, you would have figured it out in about 30 seconds. It wouldn't have taken long. Whatever the thing is that you're trying to figure out, it wouldn't take long. You'd say, oh yeah, I know that. That's structure X over here, and it looks like this, and it fits together like that. Got it. But if you're not getting there, like in 30 to 60 seconds, it means you don't have it figured out, and you're likely not going to be able to figure it out. So that's the clue. Okay, time to shift modality, shift to finding what feels good about it as a starting point. Because when you do it that way, then you don't get stuck. You get stuck when you stay in that mode of, but I got to figure this out. That's the stuck mode. I got to figure this out. I got to figure this. There's a way. There's a way out, and if I just put my logical thoughts together, I will figure it out. That's stuck mode.
I feel like I used to fill up reams of paper in the past with exercises from different self-help books and things that were all, in a sense, intellectually geared. They were geared to say, use your mind really, really well, and you'll get what you want in your life. Become a super, super intellectual wizard at figuring things out, and you can have the things you want in your life. And I really feel like maybe that's what science does, and a lot of disciplines, that we learn in college are about figuring it out, and then you'll get what you want. Do you think that's probably the case?
Oh, I don't think it's just college. I think it's all of life. I mean, we are, like it or not, I mean, you can make the division or not make the division between heart and head, but the fact is we learn intellectually. That's the way our school systems are structured. That's the way our communication systems are structured. I mean, language is intellectual in nature. Not that there is no emotional side to it. There is, but the way we learn it is through, trial and error kind of things. We're little kids, and we're getting this concept of food, and so we try to form the word food. Well, that's an intellectual exercise. It's not like there's an emotional, I'm going to feel the word food and somehow I'm going to say the word food out of it. That's not the way the mind works. The brain doesn't function that way. So of course we're going to be in our heads a great deal of the time. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a good thing. The problems only happen when we get stuck on the abstraction, when we get stuck on trying to solve the abstraction. And the most common abstraction that we get stuck on is pain, which is funny because pain is actually has a strong emotional content to it. But pain is also physical, and because it's physical, we figure, I got to solve this pain. I got to solve it. I got to get rid of it. I can't have this pain anymore. And that's how we get into like drug addiction and alcohol addiction. We get into various kinds of abuse situations. We get into all kinds of stuff simply because we're trying to mask pain.
So are you saying that we're doing that in our heads instead of in our hearts, or how?
Sometimes we do it in our heads. Sometimes we do it in our behaviors. I mean, and when you're doing it in your behavior, you're probably doing it a mix of the two, but probably more in your head because you're stuck. You don't get stuck in your heart. You notice that? That's what I'm trying to get up to. You don't get stuck in your heart. You get stuck in your head. You get stuck in I can't find my way out of this. But you never get stuck in the heart. You always know in your heart. It's like, I know this is where I want to be. I feel good there.
Yeah, and that's why I equate it in this conversation with aligning with source, because, when Abraham will say, you just got to align with source first. Align with source first. Alignment trumps everything, and so I think, okay, what exactly is it to align with source?
Yeah.
Because I can sit and meditate, and then by the time 15 minutes are up and I get up and I go to make my coffee or something, I can say, well, I guess I'm aligned with source, but the only way I know that is if I feel it in my guts. I feel it in my heart. I feel it in my solar plexus. There's a feeling in there that, I'm not like just thinking about how I'm going to solve anything in my life. I'm trusting, and feeling good. Mm-hmm. So alignment sort of comes down to being in trust, being in a good feeling place, being in a place of ease, and allowing, like Abraham says, 100% of our job here on the earth is to be receptive to our own well-being. And in a sense, that's saying 100% of our job is to be aligned with source, and 100% of our job is to be connected to our hearts. And that's how I see it. Like if I want to go out and give speeches to people that will uplift them in their lives and will soothe them and will be of value to them, I have to be in my heart and not be giving them a bunch of intellectual ideas about life and how life works. The same as if I'm talking to a coaching client, I can't be telling that client a whole bunch of theoretical ideas about, well, if you'll just align with source and you'll just relax, everything will work out. I mean, I have to be coming from that place myself. They have to feel in me that I do that, and then they won't learn by the words. They're only going to learn by trying that in their own life and experiencing it, right? So everything really comes down to each one of us having this experience of what it is to be aligned, what it is to be in our hearts.
Mm-hmm. And for me, that is how I know that there's no distinction between the two. I know that sounds a little bit weird, but let me explain. The fact is, when I explain something, when I talk about something, I'm not using exclusively the emotional side. I have to use the language side, which is an intellectual side. But I'm also drawing from the heart side. So I'm using both at the same time. I can't. It would be impossible for me to communicate what my heart is feeling without using the words. So I have to include the intellectual side. It has to be there. On the other hand, I don't want, like you said, I don't want to be in that intellectual side without also having the emotional connection. Because first of all, the person I'm talking to won't believe me, and second of all, it won't be genuine. It won't be authentic. It'll be like broken in half, so to speak. Mm-hmm. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, I really noticed that in public speaking or in just conversation. Like if there isn't a heart connection, like why in public speaking have they found in the last 10 years, that the essence of good public speaking is telling stories. And of course, the essence of watching movies and television is to hear good stories. You want to hear a story. And why do you want to hear a story is because it takes you into your heart. It takes you into a feeling place.
Right.
And then we learn from the feeling. Mm-hmm. Just like with children, there's so much research that's proving that children learn better from a play atmosphere than they do an intellectual atmosphere, where they're just being given a bunch of facts. They learn much better if they can experientially play their way through fun and through ease and joy into the understanding of the principles that we want to teach them. They learn more from the enjoyment of life than they do from struggling with intellectual understanding.
It's interesting you mentioned children, too, because Abraham refers to children a number of times, often in answer to questions at workshops from parents who are dealing with difficult situations with their children and so forth. And the Abraham answer, if I can kind of encapsulate the whole thing, tends to be let them be who they are, love them for who they are, don't try to turn them into something else, that kind of thing. And that part really resonates with me for a number of reasons, not the least of which is I actually helped to found an alternative school And the foundational idea behind that school was you let the kid do whatever they want to do with their day. You don't actually structure their day in any way for them. You don't create lesson plans. You don't build curricula. You don't decide, okay, we're going to be studying mollusks today, and everyone's going to study mollusks. It's not the way the school works at all. The kid decides what he's going to do that day, and it may not be what is traditionally considered study at all. In fact, large portion, it's called the Sudbury model. A large portion of what happens in the Sudbury model is kids just playing and playing and playing and playing and playing, sometimes to the distraction of their parents, like, is this kid ever going to study anything? But when it ends up, seriously, oh yeah, that's a big issue among parents in the Sudbury model. But what happens over time when the parent learns to kind of let go and just trust it, is you realize that everybody, and I talk about it in terms of kids, because obviously it's kids in the school, but kids are born with what I call a built-in compass. And it's kind of the same thing that Abraham talks about. It's a built-in innate knowing of what they need to do next, of what they need to learn next, of what they need to play next. And if you just let them follow their noses, so to speak, they eventually teach themselves or teach each other, because kids are really good at teaching each other. They eventually learn what it is they need to learn in all the different ways that adults want them to. So adults want them to learn to read, to write, to do arithmetic, to learn something about perhaps sciences or social studies or whatever else. The kids will learn that. And the interesting part is they'll learn it in proportion to what that particular kid needs to learn, which is not necessarily what that particular kid needs to learn. So they won't all learn it equally, but they will learn it in context with what their own interests are. Bottom line is, when they come out of that kind of a school environment and graduate, the I don't know what the exact numbers are. I saw statistics on it one time, but if you look at, for instance, the person who comes out of the regular public school system, probably about a 50 to 75% chance they have no idea what they want to do with their lives. Whereas the kid coming out of the Sudbury school system, 50 to 75%, maybe even 90% likelihood they know exactly what they want to do. And the reason is they've had all this time to play and explore and play and explore, and they've tried out a whole bunch of stuff, most of which they discarded, which can drive the parents crazy. They decide they want to learn the violin, they try it for a week, and they give it up. Like, wait a minute, you just started. Or they try to ride a bike, and they ride the bike, and they love riding the bike, and then they're riding the bike forever. Well, they never get back to playing the violin. Oh my god. Well, the fact is, when the kids follow that kind of route, they're experimenting. They're trying this. They're trying that. They're saying, yes, I like that. No, I don't like that. Yes, I like that. No, I don't like that. Yeah. And eventually, when they get out of the school, they know exactly what they want to do, because they've been able to work through all that stuff. Whereas the kid sitting in the classroom, he's being told every step of the way, you're going to study social studies right now. Now we're going to be covering World War I and the era leading up to World War II, which includes the Great Depression. And the kid's going...
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's not in alignment with what that kid needs to do. So there's a perfect example of it.
It's so great. I mean, I so wish I went to a school like that. But
me too.
In a way, I'm trying to live my life that way now.
Right.
And I encourage my clients to find their answers to their dilemmas, whatever, is through feeling their way there. And it sort of seems like with each client and with my own life, I'm always trying to get back to the point where they're enjoying the journey. They're enjoying the journey. They're enjoying the journey. They're feeling good now, so they can feel their way into the state of being they desire. When I was getting into dating, Abraham was asked, how would you date? And they'd say, we would do it passionately, prolifically, with no strings attached. They basically said we would just sift and sort completely from a place of having fun. We would go out with different people for the sake of having fun, and we would just do it as passionately and as freely as we could, and not attach any strings to the process. And he says, and you do that for a while, you're going to know who you want to be with.
Yeah,
you're going to have dated enough different people that you'll feel like, well, I know I don't want those qualities. I know I like these qualities, and you'll feel your way to this person, and you'll be vibrating with it, and that person will show up in your life because you're vibrating. You're just doing the same thing that kid did, in going through all those different fun ways, and eventually they say, I just love playing the violin, and I love, making architecture. I just love designing things. and they end up doing some kind of amazing work where they're going out and they're playing violin with a whole bunch of cool people. They're in a great band, and they design these amazing structures that are blowing people's minds, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In fact, to draw again
so
from that Sudbury environment situation, when you're running a school and you're starting a school like that, of course, you get parents who are the ones who are interested in sending their kids there. They're not necessarily totally gung ho. They still have some doubts because that's so far from the experience of what public schools are. So it's kind of a big shift to make that shift. And so when you're trying to help somebody like that, one of the things that you say is, well, we have this ingrained belief that we've taught ourselves that says, well, we have to have the complete education. We have to have been taught all the right things and so on and so forth. We have to have the grade structure. We have to have the credentials, all that. And if you want to understand why this other approach works better, you have to ask questions like, when was the last time you solved a quadratic equation? When was the last time you read a Shakespearean play? In fact, do you know what a quadratic equation is? When was the last time you took a course in chemistry? When was the last time that you took a fine arts course? What do you believe is the important distinction between Debussy and Chopin in terms of the development of music? And you start looking at it that way, you realize none of it made any difference. My life is not at a great lack. Well, actually, I do know how to solve a quadratic equation. But even if I didn't know how to solve a quadratic equation, my life would not be at a great lack,
Right.
In fact, I noticed, one of the things I noticed is I'm actually very good at math. Math was probably my strongest suit. And you have these little puzzles that show up on Facebook. They'll give you like this long, crazy equation to solve. And it's amazing how many different answers you get out of it. People have no idea how to actually solve basic arithmetic problems that have addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division all wrapped up into the same equation. So you get answers all over the board, and you just laugh at it because I happen to be very good at. There's a little thing called PEMDAS that you use to decide what order to do your calculations in, and if you follow that, then you always come up with the right answer. But I know people who take those things in Facebook and they come up with the wrong answer, and these are kids, not kids, they're adults who, when as kids, were A students, and they can't solve the equations. And yet they're perfectly functioning adults. They function very well in life. So where's the great lack that they couldn't properly do the arithmetic? Well, there isn't any. I mean, they may struggle a little balancing their checkbook, but probably most of them don't even balance the checkbook. They probably just check to see what the balance is and then spend it. So at one point, do you ask yourself, what's the importance of putting people through all these structured situations in school? What does that actually produce? And you do the same thing with life. You say, what's the point of putting ourselves through all these structured situations in life? And now you're starting to open yourself up to the idea, well, maybe I don't need to live in my head quite so much. Maybe I can actually spend my time in my heart some more and make it more of a balance.
Yeah, and maybe our natural talents and our natural proclivities, the things that really turn us on in life, will come when we spend more time in a feeling state.
Right.
I think that's what's key to me. That's the main reason I want to be in my feeling state, is because I want to feel fulfilled. And I feel fulfilled when I do the thing that is unique to me, and those unique things to me, those wonderful self-expressions, come forward when I'm feeling my way, not when I'm thinking my way into who I am. I'm feeling my way into what is the same way the kid does. Each of those kids is completely unique, but they feel their way into who they are. And I love that. Congratulations on creating that.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I've actually thought about doing it again sometime, but that's awesome. Something we'll have to save for a topic another day, because actually we're down to our last minute, so we're out of time. But before we leave everybody behind here, we want to ask you, first of all, if you have not yet subscribed to the podcast, please do so. You don't want to miss any of the episodes, because we're on 5 days a week, twice a day, plus once on Sunday, so that's 11 times a week. Just go to loatoday.net. On iPhone, you can go to iTunes or to your podcast software. On Android, you can go to Google Play. Any of those places, you can subscribe to LOA Today. And Tom, if someone wants some coaching help, a little private assistance, how do they reach you?
They can reach me through my website, which is youarejoy.com, youarejoy.com. And I have a page on there where you can sign up for a free discovery session, which is 1 hour of free coaching with me, and then you can see whether you like to work with me or just maybe address a problem that you've got.
Fantastic. Tom, it's been a pleasure as usual.
Thank you. It has, Walt. Thank you so much.
We'll see you all
Bye,
next
everybody.
time. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.